All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. Today we are going to put the footballs away. We're going to talk basketball for the first time in a while. We'll talk about the Ja Morant, Tyrese Haliburton injuries, the Wednesday slate of NBA matchups, and then a Rookie of the Year market, which I've changed my mind on, who I think should be decisively favored in the market about 6 times already. And we can see where I am today on that and where you are too. But let's start with Morant and Hallie and how their injuries impact the Grizz and the Pacers. Morant done for the season, kind of out of nowhere. Haliburton goes down, does the splits. It seems like it's not a super serious injury, but his return will be measured in weeks and not days. And for a team that is not great outside of Tyrese Haliburton, that is a big problem. But let's start with Morant. The Grizzlies were kind of trending towards potentially getting back in the playoff mix. I think their win total in the market went before Morant came back, just before, was in like the 33.5 range, which I bet a lot of the over, and that's not looking great now. And then that had ticked up to, I think, 37.5 yesterday before the news. So what are your expectations for the Grizzlies going forward, and is there any way to bet this?
Yeah, I was, I was with you. My numbers were saying, yeah, this is now a team you need to be paying attention to. They had a little bit of a tough stretch in the week of New Year, between Christmas and New Year's, where they had a couple blowout losses, but otherwise they've been playing good basketball. This pretty much puts a nail in their season. The ship was already a little bit on the way out of the harbor, and now I think it is officially on the way out of the harbor. And 13 and 23, 13th in the West, and just in general ratings that say they're in the bottom 5 in terms of net rating, in terms of simple rating system. All that checks out with my current numbers without Morant. His particular impact on the team is tough to replace. And certainly the fact that they have also lost Steven Adams for the year is massive. And Desmond Bane and JJJ, they looked way more lively playing with Morant, and that was kind of what gave you the idea that these guys might be the team nobody wants to play, and they'll knock in the play-in round. But now I think realistically they're, as a franchise, more well suited to kind of pivot for draft position as opposed to pivot to try to get into that play-in mix. So tough break for the Grizz, tough break for Ja Morant because he was playing well. And I think ultimately this is going to be a pretty lost season for them. As far as betting it, I think it does open up the door for some of these other teams in the Southwest who have pretty heavily loaded Grizzlies on their schedule at the end of the season. They may be able to pad their wins down the stretch and help their seeding. But and ironically, the team that stands out the most, a couple of games in March against the Grizzlies, who are probably going to be in tank mode, Oklahoma City Thunder. This is a team that's not going away, Jay. And I think ultimately the fact that Grizzlies are going to be non-competitive in those games could really help them.
Yeah, I'm all in Thunder. We can get to that at some point, but I think the sneaky thing with the Grizzlies is people, I think, were shocked at how bad they were without Morant when they just spiraled into, 6-19 in the games that he missed to start the season. And the expectation was that, they would kind of stay afloat and they might be hovering around 500 by the time he got back. But the thing with the Grizz is that, like, you compare this iteration of the team to the team 2 years ago that kind of broke onto the scene and kind of pushed the Warriors in the second round. And that team had so much depth, and the depth is just completely disintegrated. Where, that team had guys like Kyle Anderson and Dylan Brooks and Brandon Clark, who's injured at the moment, Tyus Jones, DeAnthony Melton, and they progressively lost some of those guys, and then they lost some more guys as well from last season. Now all of a sudden, like, you're relying on Derrick Rose, and it's just all falling apart. And I think that a lot of these players are just very dependent talents. Steven Adams obviously is a massive part of this as well, where he was a huge part of their defense last season.
Yeah.
And now there's just, it's just too much to ask for Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson to do what they've been tasked to do on offense, and Marcus Smart as well. he made perfect sense next to Ja Morant.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make a great deal of sense without Ja Morant as your tertiary offensive option. So it's all falling apart for the Grizz, and this is effectively a season to write off now. They don't have a ton to move, like Luke Kennard, I guess. Can you flip Marcus Smart again? And you just gave up stuff to get him? Probably not. But I don't think there's really too many ways to bet on this now. Tyrese Haliburton, he is out for a while now. The Pacers have been a feel-good team this year. Rick Carlisle kind of on the fringes of the Coach of the Year discussion now as we record on Tuesday late afternoon. They are one of the 5 teams in the Eastern Conference who have a record of 21-15, which is kind of strange to look at. But do you think there's any way to bet the Pacers coming off this injury?
Huge downside for them in the absence of Haliburton. There's a decent and honestly, you couched it well in the setup. We're talking weeks, not days. Honestly, like when it happened and the reaction of everybody on the court, I think they were lucky that it's weeks, not months, because it looked like it could have been even more serious. Great, any kind of hamstring injury is going to be, especially impactful for a player like Haliburton, who's so effective with his movement. So this is a problem for the Pacers, who are playing really good basketball. Obviously, you're in-season tournament runner-up. And in general, a team that, you kind of had pretty squarely penciled into the top 6 of the Eastern Conference wasn't going to have to play their way in. Now, I think realistically, when Haliburton comes back, if they're sort of in that 10, 11, 12 range, I'm not going to be shocked. And they're going to probably have to put together some winning basketball in the months of March and April if they're going to want to even have a shot at the play-in. And honestly, that's where they should be right now with the progression of a lot of these young players. The absence of Haliburton is massive. He's been one of the kind of brightest stories of this entire season. He's not in like the most improved player of the year race for some bizarre reason. I can't really tell you why. He should have been in that race because his improvement year over year was amazing. And now you're going to backfill those minutes with more Buddy Hield, more TJ McConnell, more Andrew Nembhard. None of those guys moved the needle even remotely as much as Haliburton did. Haliburton was in the discussion of top 4 guards in the NBA. And so his absence is going to be immediately felt. Pacers defense is a disaster. And they were really kind of making up for that with pace and offense, and that all kind of keyed on Haliburton. So I think the Pacers are in deep trouble in the short term, in the medium term, and I think we could basically see a number of teams that have underachieved to this point in the Eastern Conference jump them between now and when we get. Realistically, I'm expecting him to come back after the All-Star game.
Yeah. Haliburton's most improved player case was kind of interesting, where it did gather steam for a little while there, and then he cooled off with his scoring, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, he was an all-star last year and he's improved his scoring from like 20 to 24.9 points per game. It just doesn't resonate loudly enough. I think it's a bit too much of a nuanced case. I think it's not the same thing, but it's like, in 2022, I thought that 2 of the most deserving, most improved player cases were Jaren Jackson and Robert Williams, who became like defensive monsters out of absolutely nowhere. And Jaren went from like a negative EPM player to a +3 and was a defensive player of the year candidate. But because his scoring didn't leap up 10 points, he's just not a most improved player candidate. Now, Haliburton's case was a bit more overt than that, but he seems done for that now with this injury. Benedict Mathurin was starting to get a little bit interesting for 6th man of the year, just given that he very much fits the mold of kind of chucker off the bench, who scores in bunches. And he was starting to play a lot of minutes as well, which had kind of eluded him. I'm not sure Rick Carlisle's the biggest Benedict Mathurin fan. But now that this injury, one, will undoubtedly weaken their record, or at least it should, dumps them down into a different tier in the East. Yeah. Mathurin might also just start. Like, who else can dribble and drive on this team really as a hub of an offense? So I don't think that is as appealing anymore either. They're still -140 to make the play-in. They have a pretty good cushion there, but I wouldn't be expecting too much from the Pacers in the time being. All right, before we get to the Wednesday slate, NBC and Peacock, kicking off Super Wildcard weekend with a bang. Our doubleheader on Saturday begins at 3 p.m. Eastern, so we lead you up to Browns at Texans. Then tune into a Peacock exclusive matchup between the Dolphins and Chiefs at Arrowhead at 8, and we'll wrap up the weekend bringing you an NFC battle between the Rams and Lions with coverage at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. All right, notable Wednesday matchups, Drew, in the association. I think the big one is Minnesota at Boston, who had an awesome matchup earlier in the season. That's the one that really leaps out to me. Philadelphia, Atlanta, not super compelling. Looks like Joel Embiid will miss. OKC at Miami, Jimmy Butler will be out. Pelicans at Warriors is somewhat compelling as well. But what's your take on Minnesota, Boston?
Yeah, a huge advantage for Boston in this one, not just situationally, but their offensive stylings against the strength of the Timberwolves defense. I would expect that you get, some of these wings for the Celtics to try to pull Gobert away from the basket and really kind of bring out the worst in him, honestly, as a defender. A lot of options for the, for the Celtics to pivot into 5-out type of lineups, and I think that's exactly how you want to attack the Timberwolves. Timberwolves in general, I don't think anything about what they're doing is fake. Like, this team is very, very good, best defensive team in the NBA, and numbers back that up, and it all makes sense because it all revolves around Gobert. He has had a revelation, certainly this season, but there have been a handful of teams with lineups that are as diverse and as dynamic as the Celtics that have given the Timberwolves trouble, and so I think this sets up pretty poorly for the Timberwolves to be competitive in this contest. I mentioned the situational spot. Timberwolves are at the tail end of the most demanding physical portion of their season. This is the most fatigued that they're going to be all year, and so drawing the Celtics in that spot is not good. My only kind of concern about getting a little nuts playing the Celtics, laying the points here. Celtics got Milwaukee on deck on Thursday. It's a more important game. And I think the Celtics are in a brutal spot there, with Milwaukee having a ton of rest and time to prepare for that game. So decent chance you see that Boston pulls a little, pulls the rug a little bit here, and maybe isn't, doesn't have the starters in for the second half of this game. So I'm going to take some Celtics first half in addition to laying the points for the full game, and as opposed to just heavily staking the full game for the Celtics. But Celtics are the best team in the East. They're the best team in the NBA, and I think they match up quite well here for putting some, putting a little bit of a hurting on what has been a very, very good defense for Minnesota so far this season.
Yeah, Minnesota, I don't really have a great feel for them at the moment because, on the one hand, yes, they do have the best record in the West. They have the number one defense. They're also 6th in the NBA in net rating, and they're only 4th in the West. They have a worse net rating than Oklahoma City, Denver, the Clippers, who I think have all kind of played better than Minnesota this season, particularly lately. Minnesota's right in the range of the Pelicans, which is a little bizarre. Also, their defense over the past 10 games has kind of, they're just screwing around in games at the moment, the Wolves, after they had an incredible start to the season. Their defense, they got a 113.5 D rating over the past 10 games. That's good for 9th in that span. And look, still, if you're messing around and having a down patch and you've still got the 9th best defense in that span, that's okay. But I do think there are some frailties. Someone who's been very in on Gobert, Defensive Player of the Year, is very kind of jittery, being like, are they going to keep screwing around for the next 20 games? Is this kind of going off the rails? But the thing is they banked such a big lead in terms of their team D rating. Like, they're almost 2 points per 100 in front of second, who's Boston, and Boston don't really have a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And the fact also that they've just banked this 25-10 start, and if they're going to have a top 2 defense and a top 3 seed, then I don't really see many paths for Gobert to lose that award. So I think that his market price, which is in the minus 150 range, is fairly justified at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else on the slate or a part of that game that jumps out to you?
Well, I want to circle back on DPOY because I care about it.
Yeah.
I also have some Rudy, and I'm against the second choice right now, who's Anthony Davis. Tough to see the Lakers
I don't
getting
fear
any
Anthony
award.
Davis.
Yeah, tough to see them getting any award consideration the way they're playing right now. And right now their D rating 113.4 is pretty meh. Good for ninth overall. I don't know how they leap into the discussion in the top five, and the other top five. Basically to be the DPOY, you need to be on a top five defense, and right now that's the Timberwolves, the Celtics, the Magic, the Rockets, and the Sixers. There's an outside chance that the Pelicans move into the top five, but I don't really see it. There's an outside chance the Cavs do it. I'm not 100% sure what that, how that team holds up for the balance. But is there anyone besides, I guess if not Rudy, who is the next challenger?
Joel Embiid, potentially.
Yeah.
But he is dealing with, and this is a popular topic at the moment, with just the amount of games that Embiid is missing, where he can only afford to miss, I believe, 8 more games for MVP. And that's also, that same rule applies to DPOY. So he's starting to kind of teeter for that. I mean, statistically, by DEPM, he kind of laps the field at the moment, Embiid. And they've got the third ranked defense, which is, again, that's what you need. His advanced stats in terms of like the rim protection stuff and on off, like he's not really far off Rudy at all. It's just, I think it's always difficult for an MVP candidate in DPOY. I think they're just held to somewhat of a higher standard, even though Giannis did do the double in, I think, 1920. And I think Michael Jordan did it as well. But I believe those are the only two guys. So I think Embiid, the other thing too is that I just question whether Embiid and his effort level on defense will sustain the whole year, particularly as he's dealing with all these nagging injuries. Sixers are also getting like incredibly lucky with shooting luck, which also I think ties into why they may just fall off as a team in general. I think they're getting the most lucky of any team on opponent mid-range jumpers, and they're pretty close to the top as well on opponent three-point shooting luck. So Embiid, I mean, almost by default, you could make the case that he's the second favorite, but I don't fear Davis. I was kind of in on the idea that Drew Holiday could be a contender, but he's just like, he has no case over Derek White or really Kristaps Porzingis. So he might be the third candidate on his own team in terms of merit. The Magic, I don't really think Jalen Suggs is going to win Defensive Player of the Year. I don't think Dylan Brooks on the Rockets, who are fifth. I don't think Herb Jones. Chet Holmgren has a great statistical case, but right now they're the number 7 defense, and he's a rookie, and he doesn't have the pedigree yet for most voters, I think. If they had the number 1 defense, it might be a different story, but I don't really see it with Chet. Okay. I would be looking at guys like Bam Adebayo, who's in the 30-1 range. If the Heat can vault up from the 13th D to the number 5 and the Wolves fall off, I could see it for him. But it's a pretty uninspiring field at the moment. Is there anyone who jumps out to you? And AD is like, they got the 12th ranked defense. The team's under 500. It's a disaster team. Like he has so much ground to make up.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought as well, and I'm just kind of glad you're in the same spot. Yeah, I think DPOI of all of the awards is probably the hardest for anyone to make a strong case against Rudy, and the fact that we've had kind of a full flushing of kind of voter fatigue on Gobert is useful. You asked about the rest of the slate on Wednesday. This is one of the more it's one of the weirder slates. We have wild inequity in terms of rest and fatigue. Interesting to look at Denver right now, who is at Utah. Usually Utah has the elevation advantage, but Denver much more well rested here. And also Denver coming off of a pretty embarrassing performance against the Magic. So that'll be an interesting spot for them to bounce back. They're laying 7. I have that one circled. I have the Clippers circled against Toronto. Toronto has not performed well when fatigued at all this year, and they're back down in the kind of the business end of a very difficult road trip. So Toronto is on fade alert. San Antonio Spurs, huge advantage against the Detroit Pistons. I know we'll talk about the Spurs more in a minute, but I'm excited to see where that line goes. It's open at 3 right now, and I've seen some nibbles up to 3.5. I could see that going to 5 as people kind of digest what a bad spot this is for the home team Pistons. And then rounding out the wild disadvantages, the Chicago Bulls, decent spot. against the Houston Rockets and the Charlotte Hornets. Interestingly enough, biggest advantage on the board against the Sacramento Kings. Kings have also performed quite poorly when they've been tired so far this season. So decent spot to look for Charlotte to pull off an upset there.
Yep, I like that breakdown. Okay, let's get to Rookie of the Year, as you foreshadowed with the Spurs. But firstly, reigning National Player of the Year, Caitlin Clark, continues her incredible senior season Wednesday on Peacock. Clark and Iowa head to Purdue, where the Boilermakers are undefeated at home. Watch two of the hottest teams in the Big Ten face off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Peacock. So, Rookie of the Year. I can't remember a market where I've flip-flopped so much in the first 35 games of a season, where I came into the season thinking that Wemby was just going to walk it. 15 games in, thought, okay, I think Chet is going to walk it. And then flip-flop to Wemby, back to Chet. Now I'm back on Wemby. I think Wemby's going to win. And he is the dog at plus 135. Chet is minus 200. I get the Jaquez Jr. hype, but I don't think he is really in this race unless both of these guys go down and go down fast as well, because there is no minimum games played requirement for this award. I'll get into why I like Wemby, but what's your breakdown here?
Yeah, Jay, I have the strongest position in the country in the Rookie of the Year market. I got Holmgren at 4-1. Because weirdly there was a lag at the beginning of the season where he was playing well. The Thunder were winning, and it was like, it doesn't look like Pop really knows or wants to use Wemby correctly. This could take a little longer than we think for him to kind of show his true colors. And Holmgren flipped from 4-1 up to minus 180. And at that time, Wemby drifted. I think I got the bottom of the market at like plus 220. And that was actually lagged after, Pop made some adjustments in terms of who he had him on the floor with, in terms of particularly asking, what his defensive role was. And he was playing significantly better, mostly on the defensive side of the ball. But, if you're performing that well defensively, you're just going to be on the floor more. And so it was pretty clear that Wembanyama was the bet at that point. And so I've cornered this one with a 4-1 and a 2-1 with equal payout. So I kind of don't really care who wins now. But to answer the question, who will win? I think it's going to be Wemby. He's playing phenomenally well right now, incredibly well, and he is the prince who was promised. And I mean, Holmgren, I don't want to take anything away from what he's done, which has been equally impressive this year. And the Thunder are continuing to win. They're going to continue to win. They're going to be a top 2 seed in the West, from what I can tell you. But there is scope for Holmgren to get injured. He is a little more fragile, certainly. And Wemby, for what it's worth, that if he comes on strong through the middle portion of this season, it's going to be tough for people to kind of pivot, even though it's going to be a huge disparity in terms of team wins. I think people will kind of have to really rationalize and think hard about, why are the Thunder winning? It's team effort, it's coaching, it's SGA's emergence as a superstar. And Chet is helping, right? As opposed to Wemby, who looks like he is exactly who we thought he could be, kind of maturing into a real deal NBA, star. So I worry a hair about betting Wemby at this price, because we could get to March and he could pick up a nagging injury and they shut him down for the year because they're just not playing for much. And it's more important to have him 100% to start the next campaign than it is to play him deep into this season. But feet to fire right now. Who do I think will win? I think it's going to be the Frenchman. Yes,
I agree. And I think there's a couple of factors why. The biggest one to me is Trey Jones, and the fact that Trey Jones is now starting. And I have no idea what Pop was doing for the first 30 games or whatever of the season, where playing Point Sohan and playing Wemby next to Zach Collins. It was just complete malpractice. And I don't even understand what's the point? You can still lose games and just play the real lineups. And now that he's playing with a point guard, the stats with Wemby on the court with Trey Jones versus Trey Jones off are just so startling. So Wemby's true shooting with Trey Jones off the court, 50%. 60% with Trey Jones on the court. Wemby's scoring goes up 9 points per 100 possessions with Trey Jones on the court. His usage goes slightly up, and just makes sense. When it was Sohan, they just can't get Wemby the ball. He's not he's just not getting clean looks at all. And with Trey Jones, like, oh, look, this guy can run a pick and roll, and Wemby's allowed to dunk now. It's unbelievable. And if this holds, if we stay on the status quo and these guys stay relatively healthy and Trey Jones stays in the starting lineup, or just the point guard stays in the starting lineup, Pop plays real lineups, I think what we're going to end up with is Wemby is going to end up at like slightly over 20 points per game, 10, 11 rebounds, 3.5 blocks, and he's going to lap Chet in those three categories. He's going to be less efficient than Chet. That is already kind of locked in. I think there is some chance that Wemby like leads the league in DEPM, which is insane considering the talent around him and the fact that he could do it on a team that right now is 5-30 as we speak. I think that Chet is going to end up with he's going to end up with a more efficient case, better team case, better advanced stats case. But I think Wemby lapping him in counting stats, bridging the gap with the advanced stuff, and just being a cultural phenomenon, I think that is going to get him home. The concern is that, to your point, they just start screwing around with, I don't know why he has a minutes limit at the moment. Like, what are they doing? How is he able to play and look the way he does? And then he's on a minutes limit, which everyone that I've spoken to or read on Twitter seems to think it's completely insane from a medical perspective. But I think ultimately there are a lot of factors in Wemby's favor. And I think ultimately people just want to vote for the phenom. And if it's close, I think they're going to skew Wemby. I think that Chet is going to get a lot of votes, and you're going to see a lot of people come out with why Chet Holmgren is Rookie of the Year, and those are going to be the same people that voted Emmanuel Quickley Sixth Man of the Year, and he's going to lose. Is my take overall.
All right, this was the perfect day to talk about this, Jay. The Spurs have won 5 of their 35 games this season.
Yep,
they're about to win 5 of their next 7.
Wow, declaration. Are they playing the Pistons 7 times?
They're playing the Pistons, the Hornets, the Bulls, the Hornets, and the Wizards in their next 7 games.
That's good. Yeah.
They win all. The Bulls game is in San Antonio. They have a nice. They have like a nice pacing in terms of rest, and only back to backs with Hornets, Bulls, and then Hornets, Wizards back to back. But right now, I would net rating has them as the worst team in the NBA. That's not correct. I mean, at least I don't think anyone actually uses net rating to handicap a team, but just so you know, like if you're just snapshotting, well, are these guys good? Well, yeah, they're last in net rating, but honestly, like this team should probably, at least by my numbers right now, they're the 25th. I have them rated very, very similar to the team overall power rating to Chicago. And I think Chicago and Utah, by the way, I would have them over Memphis, Portland, Charlotte, Washington, and Detroit in terms of just team rating. So the wins are going to come, I think, over this middle portion of the season. And I think, the fact that he's already kind of emerged as this player and this quality of a player, combined with a team finally finding some success, I think is going to be enough to flip this market again.
Yep. I think the key inflection point for this market and what it kind of hinges on is, are people going to punish Wemby for being on a bad team relative to Chet's awesome team, or are they going to excuse his inefficiency relative to Chet because of his context? And I don't know the answer to that, but my gut is that wanting to vote for the phenom colors people's kind of perceptions, and what they want to do ultimately is want to vote Wemby, and they view it in that light. And I'm not entirely sure that would be the wrong light. Like, I right now would probably vote Chet, but I think the voting public, which voted Malcolm Brogdon over Emmanuel Quickley, I think that they are going to lean to the loud counting stats of Wemby. Maybe people will just be like, no, Chet's contributed to a team that's a top 3 seed in the West, and that's more important than Wemby's gargantuan numbers. That's entirely possible. I might have the wrong read on that, but my sense is that people really want to vote for the greatest prospect of all time, who is living up to the hype. That's my best sense at the moment, and I would have him favored in this market. Now we'll see how I feel in 11 days.
Yeah, and honestly, I know that this is stupid to think of it this way, but I still like the idea that there's going to be 3 awards given to the Thunder. Like, people are going to wrestle with SGA MVP. people are going to give Daigneault Coach of the Year. Like, if there's one of those three that you have, well, there's another really good candidate, and he also is a guy we know is going to be very, very like Hall of Fame, trajectory. I think that Chet probably falls a little bit by the wayside relative to the other Thunder Award winners. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think overall, and I agree with you, I think overall it's a little bit overrated being like, oh, I have to reward this team on my ballot. I have to do this. And that's just not really how it works. People don't go into an awards ballot being like, I must reward the Boston Celtics with an award. It's like, no, I think the people, they go in and they think about the award and they choose the candidate they think is best. And then I do think they look over their ballot at the end. And it's a random thing that I think applies to the NFL this year, where for a time, there was the idea that, there still might be the idea that the Cleveland Browns could win Coach of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Comeback Player of the Year, and Assistant Coach of the Year. And I think some people might initially put those names in. Maybe someone has that on their ballot, all four of those guys.
Number one.
Stefanski, Garrett, Flacco, and Schwartz. But then I think that you would, just as a human being, be like, hold on. They're giving 4 of the 8 awards to this random 11 and 16 that's a 5 seed. Like, that doesn't seem entirely right with me. And look, I think there is a good chance, and I would make these guys favorites in their market. I think that D'Amico Ryans, CJ Stroud, and Will Anderson, I would make them all favored to win their awards. Yeah. And those are 3 awards. But I think the Houston Texans are kind of the story of the season in a way for a lot of people.
Sure.
The fact they went, and I think that they are more so than this Cleveland Browns team. And also it's 3 awards instead of 4. So I do think that is a bit of a factor where maybe the Thunder becomes such a story of the season. If they get the 1 seed, maybe it becomes easier to vote all 3 of Shea, Daigneault, and Chet. Yeah. And also to your point, like, it's not so much that, in a way, it's not so much that I can't vote for these 3 guys. It's also just like, how do you apportion credit? Like, to me, there has to be some sort of anti-correlation to voting like Stefanski Coach of the Year and Flacco Comeback Player of the Year. Because, like, what are you saying? Like, is it Flacco or is it Stefanski? Who's responsible for what's happening? So I think it could be a similar thing to an extent with OKC.
Yeah. Final tiny tiebreaker point here. Chet's not a freaking rookie. These rules are stupid. He had a whole year of development. He wasn't playing. Like, I don't know. I don't know, man. And honestly, like, I know it's never how it's been. It's not an actual decision point for anyone. But if you're holding these 2 up, I would give it to the guy who actually is in his first year in the NBA.
Yes, I think that's fair. Also, there's a chance that the Boston Celtics win like 64 games, and they're not going to have a single awards candidate. Please, no one, like, who's going to? I mean, Mazzulla would be the guy, but I don't think Mazzulla's going to be Daigneault if Daigneault's the top 2 seed, and he's going to have to dodge other cases as well. Mm-hmm. Like, I guess their award is going to be maybe Jason Tatum, first team All NBA, or Derek White, first team All D. Like, but that's just how it is. Like, the Sixers, when they got the 1 seed in the COVID shortened season, they didn't get anything. Ben Simmons got like 16 votes for Defensive Player of the Year, and Doc Rivers didn't sniff Coach of the Year, and they were a 1 seed. Philadelphia Eagles last year were the team of the season in a lot of ways. They did not sniff a single award. So that's just how it goes sometimes. All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Please rate and subscribe if you're listening to us as a podcast. And a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.